Hi, I'm Kelly Forden, and I'm here today with Shastri Akella, and we are talking about his story, The Magic Bangle, which was published first in the Rainbow issue of the Fairy Tale Review in 2023, and then in Best American Short Stories 2024. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited. I love this story, and I thought I would start with just a little bit, just to ask you a couple questions about Kartik. We begin the story. He starts out, he's decided to be a tourist in his own hometown, and I just wanted to get a little background on him, like his family life, what you were thinking about him as a character when you started writing this.
Yeah, I often think of the ways in which we distance ourselves from reality, because that's the only way to keep reality from overwhelming us. So sometimes it's building fantasies, like this character imagines that his hometown he's a tourist in his hometown, which assures him that he's going to leave at some point. He's not going to be stuck there with, the homophobic reality that is his world. I actually came from an experience I had when I was in Hyderabad, my hometown. When I, post-pandemic, when I got to travel back to India, I was on the bus, I was going to see my friends, and my phone screen lit up with a text message, and my wallpaper was a picture of me and my partner at the time. And this guy sitting next to me on the bus saw that picture, and just complete stranger, was so livid and upset and started yelling at me, saying, you're bringing this bad Western culture to India. This is not part of India. And there was no way for me to talk to him, to say, well, there is a lot of Hindu myth that has queer characters, but there was no scope for a conversation because I was just being yelled at. And he gathered a few more guys, and they all started yelling at me. And eventually they got the bus to stop, and they forced me to leave the bus. And it was in such an odd location because my phone's network wasn't working. Because I had my US phone, I didn't have an Indian phone. And it so happened that a girl was passing by on a scooter, and so I waved her down and just said, "Hey, can you help me?" And I told her what happened. And then she was wonderful because she called an Uber for me, and she waited with me till the Uber came in. So what if I imagine a queer version of my hometown, imagining it as a utopia where all the characters have the same kindness as that of this girl who helped me get home. So that's where that story came from, where it's almost like when Kartik leaves Hyderabad is divided into, there's the old part of the city and the new city, which has all the tech companies, Google and whatnot. So, which is where he lives with his family. So he kind of decides to leave his family and then go into the old city. And that journey is almost like he's entered a mythic alternate universe, an alternate version of Hyderabad. And it does, like, if you travel to the old city, it really suddenly feels like you're through some kind of a wrinkle in time. You've entered in a previous time period.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the impetus for that, where it's not quite, and the way he can do that is he imagines he's a tourist and he wants to explore the old city and live in a hotel in the old city. And so it comes from that kind of an instinct.
Yeah, what a way to take like a terrible experience and turn it into art. It's something beautiful. When he's learning to navigate a familiar place, I'm just curious a little bit about, have you lived mostly in the US, or did you live in India for a while? Did you grow up in India?
Yeah, I spent my first 27 years of my life in India. And then I used to work for Google actually in Hyderabad, and moved from there to Dublin, Ireland, and then to the UK. So I did move around a lot, both within and then once I left the country abroad. But the first 27 years were in India. That's where I did all my schooling. My undergraduate was in Comp Sci, which I did in India as well.
Wow. You had similar experiences in that you had to basically be in hiding for 27 years as well. And then, so you knew that the way out of that was an escape to the US. That was like the only option. Is that true? Is that still true?
Yeah, it was funny because at the time when I left, I just thought I was asexual, and it was an escape, but it was more to escape an arranged marriage because my parents were really trying to pressure me into getting into an arranged marriage. I would routinely come home from work and see a girl and her family sitting in my living room. I just would have to go meet them, and I kind of got sick and tired of it. I initially moved from Hyderabad to Delhi, and then relatives started showing up at my apartment in Delhi with pictures of girls, or I would open my apartment door and there'd be like these pictures that were slid under the door. I said, okay, I'm going to go to a place where they can't potentially visit. And there are a lot of my family lives in the US. And at the time, getting into Ireland was quite hard compared to what it's now. So when an opportunity came up, I said, okay, I'm going to there because they can't come there. So
Right.
I moved it up.
This happened to my
That was my
roommate too. My roommate
Oh,
in
really?
college. Yeah. I mean, she was a girl, but her parents were always setting her up with people. She had her own boyfriends, and she didn't want any part of this. And it was tough. It was really tough. Okay, so it was curious to me. So his father gives him this 1-year ultimatum to get the hobby out of his system. And I was wondering if that was particularly related to like homosexuality or any hobby at all. And was he saying in the story, you have 1 year to get this out of your system and then you're going to get married? What did he mean by that? Was it kind of like, I was thinking about like the Amish, how they have Rumspringer, where you can like go have fun for a year and then you're done?
Mm. I think it's because a lot of South Asian parents think of this as like, they think of queerness or homosexuality as something that's just a phase. And I think that seems quite universal, like a concept from a conservative perspective. But I've known a lot of my queer friends, their parents said, oh, you'll get over it. Just go indulge for some time, get over it and come back. And, you'll grow up. They think it's like something which through your teenage and younger years, you get it out of your system and then you realize you actually don't want that. What you actually want is to get married and have kids and have a home. They don't realize it's just intrinsic to who you are. So that's what he meant. That, and from the father's perspective, he's being generous. He's not cutting him off right away. He's not sending him to conversion therapy. He's like, I'm giving you a full year to explore your hobby. But in return, once you come back, you'll have to go the family way. So that was what he was saying by that.
Is that starting to change at all in India, or is that?
I think I would say it's interesting to see it happen more in wealthier families which have had access to education. Those are the ones that have starting to shift, because wealthier families, there's the next generation, which would be like my oldest siblings' generation. They've gone to liberal schools. Some of them have studied abroad and then gone back to India. So they've had exposure to other ways of thought, and so their children who are in college now, they have a much more liberal world. But typically, they tend to come from wealthier families who can afford an education like that. But for the most part, I would say a majority of the country is still very much. It's hard, and I think the new regime is not making it easier. There's a literary festival that happens in India called the Rainbow Lit Fest, which is for queer writers. And it's been running for a few years, but the last year, because 2023, I think, was when, end of 2023, early 2024, the petition to legalize same-sex marriage was rejected by the Supreme Court. And usually the ruling party is not supposed to interfere in that, but they were members of the party that were posting openly on Twitter and other platforms saying, oh, what's next? You're going to legalize marriages between humans and dogs because people want that. So they were very actively opposing it, and it did get it eventually shut down. So in the wake of that, last year, for the first time, there was a lot of protests against the Rainbow Lit Fest. But, a lot of, artists came and also supported it, but they never faced resistance. Everyone thought, oh, it's their own little bubble that can exist, but they wanted to shut that bubble down because they thought, oh, it's dangerous. It's corrupting young minds. So,
that's so sad. Yeah.
Yes, it's changing in smaller pockets, but it's a very, very slow change. I would love to see it change in my lifetime, but yeah.
Yeah, that's tough. Well, I didn't want to get off the story, but I did want to discuss the issue because it's one of the main themes of the story. Shahrukh and Kartik are from two different cultural backgrounds as well. For some families, like someone here who might be Jewish marrying someone who's Christian, for some families, that's going to be a bigger issue than others. Sounds like for them, that might be an issue as well.
Yeah, because that's like it's seen as, in some ways, as the ultimate sacrilege to get married to somebody or to be with somebody who's, for Hindus, to date a Muslim, and the other way around as well. So in some ways, Karthik's now committed like two major cardinal sins. He's gay and he's dating a Muslim guy. Like, it's the worst possible thing he's done.
Right. And even the bangle is like, no, this is not gonna be good with the parents. Yeah.
Yeah, so the bangle is telling him the truth, but he's like, no, I'm going to defy the bangle. And in some ways, that's his way of wanting to claim himself fully, saying it doesn't matter because no matter what I do, I'm going to get rejected. And I think that's part of the thought and the reasoning I had is a lot of times people think, oh, if you're deferential to if you're in the minority and you're deferential to the majority, you will eventually be accepted. But you
Yes.
be accepted only until you serve the purpose of the majority. And once that's done, you will anyway be flushed out of the system. That's his thing. Like, I'm going to get rejected anyway. I might as well live fully who I am. So even the
Exactly.
bangle tells him this is not going to turn out like a fairy tale. He says that's fine, but it's going to be my truth. So
Right. I love that. And it's the same way here now as well. People are starting to realize if I kowtow to these people who are trying to squash me, like there's no getting around people who are bigoted. You might as well be yourself and live your life because I don't know. I did want to get off on the United States, but it is happening here now too. And I think a lot of people thought, oh, if I behave myself and if I do this, but these people are always going to be bigoted. It's not a matter of behaving yourself or trying to fit into whatever they're looking for. It doesn't
yeah,
work. Yeah. I loved that part of the story as well, where it's just like, I'm going to do exactly what I want to do, and I'm not going to
yeah.
play this game anymore.
I think just him also finding, because he's found that fulfillment with Shahrukh, and he's like, he feels truly visible. And I think when you've had that experience where you feel truly visible and alive with somebody, you know how rare and important that is. And you're willing to let everything else go just to, protect and guard that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. Okay, tell me about the magic bangle and how the idea of that came to you.
Yeah, I was, I was interested in this idea of what if there is, because I wanted some kind of a magical element to it. And then I thought of the bangle because in some ways we get a sense with Karthik, we see it explicitly, but even with Shahrukh, we get a sense that his parents want him to be a straight man who gets married and has kids because he is sad when he talks about parents and he says, you can't apologize for your parents. And the bangle is the antithesis to the masculinity that both these characters are under the pressure of. They're not conventionally masculine and they don't want to go the heteronormative route. And the bangle therefore becomes that gateway. The same thing of it's a symbol of femininity, and they embrace it because that's very much part of who they are. So I wanted some sort of a gateway which adds that magical element to the story, and yet I wanted the decision itself that these characters make to be independent of the magic that the bangle is bringing. So to see that it gives them a certain sense of clarity about what the future might be like, but it's still, in doing that, it gives them a clarity also about we want what we want irrespective of the challenges we face. So I didn't want the solution to be provided by a magical element. I wanted the solution to still come from human agency and from desire, because I think that's so much more powerful than allowing some magic trick to come in and then set things right for you. So it was those two reasons of bringing in femininity as a way for these two men who are under the pressure to perform cis masculinity, and to then say, okay, the magic is coming in, but we'll still do what we want to do.
So it has sort of a glass facing to it. Is that correct? Like, so that you could see into it. And when they look into it and one face is superimposed over the other, it is a magical moment. But that would also happen if you were just looking in in a mirror. I thought that was so wonderful the way you did it. And did that take you a while to figure out how to phrase that so that it seemed both magical and it could be real?
Yeah, I think the image formed fairly quickly in my head, but making sure I put it in words that allowed for clarity, that took a moment, because I wanted both readings to be possible. So I'm glad you were able to see that. Because yeah, you're right. It's like there's somebody standing and somebody else appears. The images, the shadows kind of overlap, which is what I wanted. But at the same time, I wanted the possibility of magic to be there. That clarity just took a little bit of time, but when I finally got it, I was very pleased. It was worth spending hours in just that one sentence.
I was going to ask you about that too. So you have so much symbolism in the story, and I was a little concerned. I wanted to ask you about specific things in case I missed something, being from America. So when you placed it near Golconda Fort, Did that have a specific symbolism for you in terms of the story? Or is that just the center of the city? And so since you were going to place it in that city, that's a logical place to do it? Or did it have some deeper meaning for you? And I was thinking about Lakshmi too. Shows
Oh
up.
yeah, I mean
Yeah.
she's. I mean the fort is it's one of the landmarks of Hyderabad. In that, so if you travel to if you travel to Hyderabad as a tourist, that's usually, and if you take, say, a tour bus, that's usually one of the first destinations they take you to. So this guy falls in when Karthik goes into this tourism mindset, he reaches for the first thing that a tour guide would send you to. There was that conceit of, when you clap once, it's a million, twice, it's a friend. That's actually part of it was historically, that's how it was used. And I visited the place quite a while back, and then it's so amazing how, despite the distance, the way it's constructed, the architecture, the sound just travels. And you could be deep in an inner chamber and you would hear it exactly, very clearly.
Wow.
And so I said, okay, that's an interesting feature to talk about, but then that was what I wanted to do a callback to later on.
Mm-hmm.
And so that way it worked both ways, both as a good tourist destination, but also to plant something that I could then bring back later on.
Did you know quite early on in writing the story that you were going to use the clap at the end too? The double clap?
I knew I wanted it to come back. I just didn't know which form it would take back. But then I didn't want it to be too explicit, like somebody literally clapping on the street, but I wanted it to be a little more subtle. But I knew I wanted that because two claps being a friend and then just bringing that together. So I was keen on doing that.
One of my favorite writers, Richard Ford, always sets a lot of his stories on different holidays because there's always that cultural touch point for, at least for American readers, if it's on July 4th or if it's on Labor Day. And it makes the story resonate on a deeper level because we all have that cultural touch point here. So when it's Holi, it has a deeper cultural resonance, I'm sure, in this story, because that's such a major holiday. And I just wondered if you could tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I was, with Holi, one of the things is the old city is predominantly Muslim there. And I think it's about 75% of our Muslim population. And then Holi is a very Hindu festival. But, the lived reality for the most part, when politicians don't interfere and stir up, secular differences. And of course, there are conservative families that do not want the personal lives to mix. So they wouldn't want you to marry a Muslim, or a Muslim wouldn't want you to marry a Hindu. But the everyday lived reality, those two things, the boundaries between the two are very blurred. They're not neat at all. So you could have, for instance, there would be, if you go into the old city on Holi, you could have a full-fledged celebration. Diwali is celebrated, and it doesn't matter what your faith is, you just go partake in the celebrations. And the same for Ramadan. Ramadan is celebrated. I've gone myself many times to the Ramadan night markets, and because they fast through the day and eat through the night, so there's this lively night market that's set up, and it just stays active throughout the night. And I've gone there at 2 a.m. and had some of the best meals I've had in the city. So I wanted, in some ways, as we have these two, the Hindu and the Muslim boyfriends getting together on the street, show a celebration that brings in a Hindu festivity into a predominantly Muslim neighborhood. And it's not even something that they explicitly talk about or draw attention to. They don't choose. It's not about being inclusive. It's just a way of life there. And then there's something to the vibrancy of the colors just makes it really stand out. And in some ways, with these characters having found each other, there is that vibrance. It's almost like their life was missing that sense of color. So it just I initially thought of setting it around Diwali, but then something about the color just drew me in. So that's why I used that festival instead.
And I was also reading about Lakshmi, how the legend of how she, in terms of the city and why the Lakshmi temple is there. Do you want to talk about that at all? I thought it was kind of a nice parallel to the story.
Yeah, it's so. I mean, that legend has been just circulated for so long, and it's the Nizams who were ruling that area. They were very, very wealthy, and some of the most expensive clothes and jewelry of the time was produced in that part of the world. And so the legend was that they have so much wealth because they were Muslim, but they would also invoke Lakshmi because those borders were fluid. So they would invoke her, and then one day she came and pleased, and he said, "Oh, I've forgotten an important appointment. Please wait for me will you promise to wait for me? And she says, sure. And he's gone and doesn't come back. And because she's there, her wealth sort of stays in the area. So if you go to the old city, there's this Charminar, which is a really iconic building. So there's Golconda on one end of the city, and the other end is Charminar. So in some ways, it's sort of bookend the city. So Charminar is like this giant gateway through which you enter. In the old times, you would enter the city through that point, and your destination is Golconda. So it's like the starting and the ending points. So in some ways, this character has gone from the ending point to this point and sort of rediscovering of the self. But it's also that juxtaposition of this goddess of wealth, who's a Hindu deity, and this iconic architecture that's Islamic, and they sort of really come together. And it's despite there've been some riots in that area, but the temple was always left unharmed. Nobody ever touched the temple. And likewise, there's a very historic mosque there. Nobody's ever touched the mosque. So I think even in their moments of extreme anger, people are careful about what boundaries they would not cross. So there is that. I think Hyderabad that way is a very unique city in that in other places communal violence is just go completely rapid. They would just attack anybody and everything. But here, even in the middle of a riot, there were only 2 riots, but even in the middle of those, they would not touch certain spaces.
Why do you think that is? I'm just curious.
I think because in some ways it comes from the fact that it is a certain sense of respect for it being a landmark of the city, even if you're not of that faith. But it's also this because the Nizams and these people have a lot of, if you're from Hyderabad, if you spent a lot of time there, you have a lot of respect and almost loyalty to the Nizams, even though it's like a few hundred years back. So it's this idea that if the Nizams install this, we have to keep their legacy safe. We can't let this happen. And I think there is some kind of a subconscious awareness even underneath that anger, that this will tide over, but we shouldn't leave a permanent mark, because if you destroy some of these long-term, long-standing landmarks, the mark would be complete. But if it's a skirmish that you can get away from and go back to life as it's normally lived, it somehow hurts less. So I think that's why that it's for both of those reasons, I imagine.
Yeah. And what about the jinn? When she grants a wish, it changes fate. And then can you tell me a little bit about that legend of what the idea is, like when you change fate and what price you might pay for doing that? And in particular, obviously I can sort of think of things that might happen to Kartik and Shaluk if they tempt fate. But what is is that a widespread belief, or now people think of it like a fairy tale? Are there a lot of people who are still superstitious and really believe in the jinn's power?
Both a lot of, Hinduism, I know as somebody who was born into Hinduism, and a lot of my friends in Hyderabad are Muslim, and I know in both religions, it's this idea of you should accept the fate you've been granted and you shouldn't fight it, because then that way you will tide over the difficulties in life, and what is good for you, what is nice for you will await you. In Hinduism, it takes on the form of, if you humbly accept your fate and show respect to the Creator, then you will be reborn in a much better life. And in Islam, it's more if you accept your fate, then you will go and eventually you'll reach heaven, Jannah. So it's this idea of not wanting to tamper with fate, because that's like saying I don't accept the will of God. And any kind of alternate practice, whether it's invoking a jinn or even in like Wiccan traditions, there are versions of those in India, which is called Tantra, which is Hinduism's version of Wicca. So going in that direction is seen like, you're going against the order of God. And in a way, the way Christianity went into a lot of countries and said, that's paganism. It became a blanket term for any religion that wasn't Christianity in countries that were colonized. Which is why, for instance, in Ireland, they don't like the phrase paganism, because that was their faith, which was that Christianity classified as paganism. And that's what happened in Hinduism. A lot of local, native, and tribal cultures and traditions, some of them got folded into Hinduism, and some which were rejected, which just said, that's bad. You shouldn't go that route. And so I wanted to bring that in, because somebody who's in the fringe would take a fringe route. There was this amazing essay that I read recently about how there's such interest in astrology right now, because people are finding that as an alternative way to, understand reality, because normal structures are excluding so many people that the only way they make sense of the world is through astrology, which is why there's also a renewed faith in invoking jinns or other forms of Tantra or Wicca. So I wanted to bring that in as something that these characters reach for, and I wanted jinns historically in myth have been presented as men, and I said I wanted to switch that and say, what if it is a woman? I would feel like, as two queer men who are kind of very distrustful of men and the world built by men, they're much more likely to trust a woman. So that's why I switched that character of the jinn from a man to a woman. So yes, a lot of these ideas swirled in my head. Sorry, that was a very long-winded answer to your question.
No, that was great. I'm Irish, actually, and I've just sort of started getting back into my own cultural history and traveling to Ireland and seeing, like, the fairy mounds and what they lost really when Christianity kind of took over and squashed all of the old beliefs. And some of them are so beautiful and so naturally inclusive that it really makes me sad to think about what was lost by that binary that then took over, the patriarchal.
I was actually just there. Yeah, I mean, this summer I was there and I was just doing research for a book, and there were so many. They were very, very. Everyone I met was very open and willing to share. The mythologist and storyteller Mankan Magan, who passed away recently, he really brought back Irish as a language for younger generations.
Oh, I think I did hear. Yes, I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Yes, I had the opportunity to meet him, and a lot of folks. This is sitting on my desk. I met this artist in Mayo County, Mayo, and I don't know if you can see this. This is he would just take these stones and carve on them. And so this is Bridget. It's a carving of Bridget, and how she sort of is a harbinger of everything that brings. So it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's interesting because Christianity took over Catholicism so completely, and yet my great grandmother was Bridget. I mean, there were so many Bridgets still that they kept some of that old. Some of the old names, some of the, now they're bringing back the Irish language, which is so wonderful. And it seems like a culture that has had it with being told what's right and what's wrong. And is sort of, which is wonderful to see, actually.
When Patrick came in, he had somebody rechristened as St. Bridget to just bring those people to then invoke to Catholicism instead.
Exactly, but I don't think many people know that. I think they thought they were naming their kids after St. Bridget, and it's like, no, it goes back further than that. I wanted to ask you if there's any significance to when he takes the picture, he's capturing the moment of attraction. And and that comes through in the bangle too, they both see each other in that moment of first attraction. And I wondered why that was important to you to capture that.
Everything else just dies out, and it's just that one, you're laser focused.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, so while he's going up to there, he's using his camera, and so the camera sort of is becoming this distancing device. And even when he sees Shahrukh for the first time, it's through the camera lens. But it's in some way, Shahrukh's presence is so powerful and magical to Karthik that he has to let the artifice go. He doesn't want to be in that artificial reality anymore. He doesn't want to be a tourist anymore, even though that's what brought him there. He just wants to be here and now and be present with this guy he's attracted to. So I think it's in some way his presence brings him back to reality. And because he's made the choice of choosing reality over an escape, the magic bangle is sort of this little reward for him. It's like the fates had given him a reward for saying, okay, you were acknowledging reality. He could have just as easily seen him and just moved on, saying, okay, I'm attracted to him, just want to keep being a tourist. And his fate would have taken a different turn. But instead, he chose to, put the camera away and go down and meet this guy. And he doesn't know if Shahrukh's queer, how he would respond. But he takes a chance, and the magic bangle sort of becomes this reward for taking a risk.
And then when Shahrukh's father leaves, I loved the line that you had that his face, it was like a cage opening or something. I have it here, but I don't want to take the time to look for that. But it was a beautiful way to put it, because it just encapsulated that tension of having someone who doesn't approve in the room and then they leave and you can just be fully yourself. And it was wonderful. So when you were writing this, I just wanted to ask a little bit about your process because this is largely for writers. So when you were writing this story, for instance, how do you work first? Do you get the characters first and then you have to fill in scenery, or do certain senses come to you first, sight or sound or anything in your process, or do you layer in details afterwards?
Most often, it comes to me as an image, and I mean, so this. I previously had this image of a bangle that serves as a portal, but I just didn't have a story where it could work as a device. I have this ongoing document where I list all of my ideas, and so that was there. And then sometimes the real world gives you a stimuli that then activates that very story in which the images or the characters you've created or you've thought of just can really come to life. So for me, this external stimulus that brought that to life was that event that I experienced in Hyderabad. And I said, okay, what if Hyderabad is a utopia? And then I said, oh, it's in a utopian world where queerness is okay. What if the Magic Bangle is part of that utopia? But it's not. It's neither the utopia nor the magic that allows these characters to be authentic to themselves and to each other. So I had that image of a magical bangle, and then this experience that I had. Somehow those two fused together, but I didn't want this main character, I didn't want Karthik to directly go there and find it. I wanted him to lose himself a little bit before he finds himself, because that's somehow more rewarding as a reading experience. Because if he straight away goes into the old city and then just finds him on the first day, that's a different thing. So then I think I've said, okay, what if he has to find him? What if he has to lose himself? What would be a good location for that? And that's where Golconda came in, because then I remembered the double clap and I knew that could come back. So I think with this story, I really stacked all the elements one on top of the other. And once I had all the elements, I wrote down a very, very brief plot summary for the opening, the middle, and the ending, because otherwise I knew there was so many balls in the air that it would end up messy if I don't organize my thoughts. I usually don't plot, but with this story I did, and actually it was very rewarding to then, instead of feeling restricted, that structure allowed me a lot more freedom, because I had to write despite the structure and invent despite the structure. So it kind of forced me to be more creative because of that.
Have you ever done it since then?
Yeah, I mean, the second novel, I just completely plotted it out, because again, has a lot of elements that are working with it, and it's a fantasy novel, and I said, okay, I just really want to plot the story out before I write it. And having completed a draft of the book, I'm really glad. Otherwise, I could see myself going down so many rabbit holes that I'd end up cutting out from the novel.
I haven't done that yet, but I've been wanting to try it, actually, because you can get so lost when you just are flying by the seat of your pants. And I've put down more stories because I didn't know what was going to happen next. And I think if you plotted it out, or if I had some idea, it wouldn't seem as scary.
Yeah, for sure. And it allows you to work towards an ending, which is, I think, both this story and the second novel, I had an ending in mind. I knew where I wanted the story to land. And then I also during the plotting process, I said, okay, if that ending, if I want that ending to feel earned, what has to happen for that ending to feel earned? So then I saw these elements and I added those. So.
Oh, that's very cool. What about at the very end when Kartik puts on Sharuk's sandals and Sharuk places the bangle on Kartik's wrist, and it does feel like a wedding. It feels like being led to believe that they're joined now, and then we get the double clap. So it ends in a utopian moment too. Like we have the feeling that they'll be together and it will end happily. It's a fairy tale, and I hope one that can happen in the real world. Yeah. It's hard to write a happy story with a happy ending. And
that actually, there's a English film that came out a few years back called God's Own Country, which is a gay love story set in rural England. And there was somebody who interviewed the filmmaker, and the filmmaker said, I think having queer stories with a happy ending is actually a powerful form of resistance, because you're telling the world that you can try and shut me down, but we'll find our happy ending anyway.
Yeah, I loved it. Is there anything that I didn't ask you about in the story that you thought I might? I just always like to ask that if I missed
I've never had somebody ask me that.
I didn't ask about the woman who worked at the hotel. I thought she was a beautiful, Sue. Yeah. And I love the fact that she knows what's going on and she gives them that like little smile and she's so happy for them. That was nice to have her there.
Because so Sue's the name of my best friend from India. So every novel I write is one character who's named after her.
Oh, wonderful.
It's like she's kind of my found family now. And she, in general, I think, especially back home, all my friends who accepted me when I came out are women. I think there's one guy who was accepting and everyone else just absconded. So I just have that affinity for my women friends, and that this one in particular, she's become my family now. So every work I write, I have one kind of utopian character who's named after her. So
that's wonderful. I love that. And what are you working on now? You're working on the fantasy novel, and when is that? You're through the first draft?
Yeah, and then this winter and then summer I went to, because it brings in a lot of Irish myth into it. So this summer, and in fact last summer, I went and did some research. So I finished a draft before I went this summer and then did my research, because then I know exactly what holes need to be plugged. This was something my MFA professor, Sabina Marie, suggested to me. She said, always have a draft and then do deep research, because otherwise you'll just go in 100 different directions, which was very solid advice. I knew exactly what I needed, and I went to the folklore archives at UCD, went to a lot of spots, because unlike Greek or Roman myth, Irish myth is not yet fully that well documented. It very much still lives in the oral tradition. And it was, my God, the people, there's such incredible storytellers. I think Irish storytellers are the best storytellers in the world. You could hear them for hours, and they just open their hearts up.
And more so as the night goes on.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, it can be dangerous. So, but what led you to the Irish? I'm just curious, what led you to Irish mythology in this book?
I'd lived there before, like I said, when I was working with Google, and I had a little bit of, which is their iconic myth, which has their character Cuchulainn, who's kind of the counterpart to Achilles, and another colleague used to work as a tour guide in Cashel, so she took me to Cashel and I got to see it. So there was that myth that had already gotten planted in my head, and I again put it in my ideas list, and I wanted the right story to show up so it can come to life. And I had this vision of, or this idea of, I love horror and I love vampires. So I had this idea of vampires migrating from Ireland to the US and getting political asylum here. And that was the initial conceit that started the whole book. And then I again stacked all the elements. And then I didn't want them just to be vampires. I just wanted them to be vampires who are really rooted in Irish mythology. And they come from a certain lineage, and it's very connected to the history of Ireland as well. The vampires come to be in the wake of the Anglo-Saxons, and especially the Tudors attacking Ireland. And they really the Tudors especially cleared out so much Irish woodlands to build their estates, but also because they didn't want the Gaelic lords to have a place to hide. So all of that really, it took me a while to organize it into a plot, because I didn't want there to be so much backstory that the story doesn't move forward. So that's the book I'm working on now.
Wonderful. It sounds great. I could ask you a million more questions about that, but I see we're out of time. Darn it. Okay, well, maybe we can talk again after it comes out. Maybe I'll move on from a short story podcast just so we can talk. All right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I hope we get a chance to talk again soon.
Oh, that would be amazing.